2025. And before I get into any clips or stories or videos, I had some interesting conversations yesterday, and it involved Tamara Leach and Chris Babar and Helen Bruce and people I know that are in the Canadian Armed Forces that are still in the courts trying to fight. And they've named Wayne Eyre, who was the chief of defense staff at the time, through COVID, I'm talking about, and the one that created the Can4 Gens and enforced them on the Canadian Armed Forces and wanted them to be the example for other government agencies to follow. And so because Tamara Leach, I don't know if people know this, I wish people would know this. She is a Canadian hero. She's a world hero, actually. And during the Freedom Convoy, this is something, again, that the left and right extremists that also operate within cabinet wanted to happen. And they didn't realize it was going to get as big as it did. And they wanted it to be violent, and they wanted to elicit emotional response in people. Crisis actors were hired. People did take it upon themselves. Rich millionaire types too, wearing balaclavas and a freaking not was it the Confederate flag or the Nazi flag? There was multiple flags that were intentionally planted within the audience or the protests in order to blame it on people that were part of there in a peaceful way, that were not even involved in the Freedom Convoy. They were anti-freedom, like literally these groups. And there's just so much information on that, and there absolutely needs to be an investigation open back up into it, and people are not going to stop fighting in the courts. Unfortunately, we're not winning, as you could see with what happened with Pat King and with Jeremy McKenzie and with the Coots case and the people from there that were unlawfully detained. They were completely slandered and defamed on all mainstream media outlets that are considered to be news, and there were honeypots even within government, within the RCMP, that were not doing anything that was part of protocol at all, and were making claims that were deemed to be completely false, including alleged attempts to murder RCMP officers. This was not true at all. But again, these guys for life, now they're painted as criminals and criminal records. They will never be able to work in government, likely having travel issues, likely having issues with not just work, but with mortgages and insurance approvals, and can't volunteer, be part of their communities in that capacity, and just so many other reasons when they were speaking out against literal, unlawful, illegal, and harmful mandates and measures and experimental therapeutics that were not vaccines that were pushed on society. And even in early of 2022, when people say, oh, it was going to end anyways, no, it wasn't. They were doubling down, and they were further increasing their measures and stricter lockdown measures and mandates planned. And even the approval of this therapeutic to children under the age of 12. So 12, like as low as 5 at that point. This was like late November, early December of 2021. And then they were like further again doubling down on these measures and making it where people had no choice but to continue getting their boosters, or they would not again be able to go to gyms. They would not be able to go to restaurants. They would not be able to travel. They would not be able to go to work. People's lives were destroyed. People's businesses were destroyed. People were not able to go to funerals of loved ones or even see them before they died in hospice care and such. People were not able to go to ceremonies or celebrations or religious events or family gatherings, weddings, etc. And again, this has constantly been proven that these people were given this information, and for whatever reason, they refused to acknowledge it. So objective data, they refused to look at because of subjective statements that didn't have any grounds in measurable, repeatable, or observable data. And we were giving actual data. And so the question was, Tamara Leach, they're looking at the Crown, by the way, again, our government, and not even listening to Canadians that are saying, like, what are you doing? Like, you're ruining her life. You're stressing her out. You're financially crippling her. You're like, she's already been in jail. She's a grandmother. And again, she did nothing wrong. This was an alleged mischief charge. She was doing a peaceful protest and assisting with organizing a peaceful protest that literally changed the direction, literally changed. The Freedom Convoy in Canada is what stopped this from being pushed as much as it was. And then when they declared the Emergency Act again, like I watched hours of the weeks that the the hearings were going on and the testimony from people, and I was monitoring that as well. People lying under oath or refusing to answer questions, like Marco Mendicino and Chrystia Freeland, and it was just a farce, honestly. And justice was not served at that point. We had hero judges like Mosley and Miller and Helen Gruse's lawyer team and Tamara's lawyer team. There's so many good like legal people out there, and even with RCMP, like I slam people that do things that are like Brenda Lucky. I called her out. She was the head of the RCMP with the pronouns in her name and everything, right? And that's not to just judge her based on that. Obviously, it doesn't matter. But again, like, you are the head of the RCMP, and there are certain things that don't align with Canadian cultures or ideologies, and or that make sense, right? And it's very much like subjective. And so she again was responsible too, because like it was failed leadership at the top to actually explore what was actually going on during the pandemic. And so that was domestic, right? When I talk about international things, I'm talking about Canadian Armed Forces, right? But Wayne Eyre, like his response and his leadership, it's domestically and abroad, and forcing these therapeutics on people, kicking people out, including one of my friends that I went to RMC with, and she was incredible. She was she was an artillery officer as a female. Not a lot of female artillery officers in the Canadian Armed Forces, I'll tell you that. And she was an officer for many years, and then she went and switched trades, but still serving. So she had over 20 years in, and she was kicked out while pregnant, her first pregnancy, and it was considered high risk already because of her age and it being her first pregnancy. And she was sharing the medical and the scientific and the government data and the VAERS and the debunked original trials and the testing not being done on pregnant women, and the trials that were done, or inadvertent experimental, like experiments that were done on the population, right? Like, these were like, it was coming back as there were spontaneous abortions, there were stillborns, so many different issues and developmental issues. And people like Helen Gruse were investigating as part of the Sexual Assault Child Abuse Unit in Ottawa. It's a fairly significant city in Canada, and it's also where the capital is. And she had over 20 years service as well with the Ottawa Police Services. And she was getting completely censored and ostracized and segregated and suspended and charged that first weekend of the Freedom Convoy. So on the 29th of January, of 2022, she was suspended and charged, and she's still going to the courts. She just got found guilty, which is disgusting, and she's obviously appealing it because, again, like we've shown as well, I've been following Chris Renwick and like her trial as well. And again, she is a Canadian hero, a literal hero that was giving objective data to her supervisors, her chain of command and higher, and they were not only refusing to look at the information, but they were also like she became the enemy, right? And getting defamed within the community, getting defamed by mainstream news media, state-funded media, and what are their qualifications, right? Like these journalists and these like news anchors and things like that. They're like, what are their actual credentials other than doing a little bit of school in propaganda psyops? Canada, like the major institutions, unfortunately now it's teaching a lot of pseudoscience. They're not getting science degrees, and they're not getting the proper qualifications or certifications to report on what they're talking about, for people to actually consider them to be the actual experts on international events or even current events. Okay, they don't have access, they don't have the training, they don't have the qualifications that people like myself or Helen Gruse or my friend who I can't name on here, like that she has, or people like Tamara Lich or Chris Babar, or countless veterans and still serving members that gave these people information, and they again refusing to look at it and like laughing and scoffing or dismissing, and they don't have the qualifications. And so I think that, if you're going to be state, like, and they are state funded, like media, and you're going to be people that are classified as being experts or trustworthy sources, then you need to have much more training. And I've offered to media to do the hostile environment awareness training course, because it has a lot of information in there that can keep them and us safe, especially when again, it's how to deal with protests, conduct after capture, what to do to avoid getting into dangerous situations, and then how to research data. Basic level stuff, right? That people are not even getting in Canada, right? Like, so many different countries have different levels of censorship. So if you want to get access to information that you want to look at and you can't get access to it from your country, if you get on a VPN and you connect to other countries, which there's the ability to do, then you can get access to information that you wouldn't otherwise get. And you have to do that in multiple different areas and locations. And then you have to assess based on multiple different data points and make an assessment based on like your own analysis and expertise, etc. And not just be very one-sided in the research. And I would say, oh my God, there's so much I can get into about this. Not being biased even with the search engine results that you're looking for, deleting cookies. Anyways, I can go on, but they don't have the qualifications or the certifications, and people are listening to things like CBC to get actual facts. And it blows my mind. And that's okay. But again, if they were bringing on people that could actually provide the facts, right? If they were providing platforms for people that actually knew what they were talking about, then maybe. But again, these outlets in Canada have been it's been a failure, right? And so it's talked about in the debates as well about whether to defund media like CBC. So I won't get too much more into it. But I'm being redundant. But anyway, so all of these people, and I know so many more. I know thousands of people whose lives were destroyed, ruined. Like myself as well. For years, I wasn't able to see my family. Like I wasn't able to travel. I wasn't able to go to gyms or restaurants. I wasn't able to work. My work contracts, they were extended and then completely canceled on me and stuff like that, and other work contracts and stuff like that I would do periodically, like for this within the executive protection, like close protection industry, because of what I was sharing regarding Ukraine and Russia, what I was sharing about COVID, what I was sharing about the lab leak, all this stuff. People already put me in the extreme right category, right? Which is when you give information that counters the norm, or what's being pushed or propagated, then that is now being considered to be right wing, when it's literally just someone that's not left or right. It's down the middle and just assessing data. And so anyway, long story longer, Wayne Eyre was the chief of defense staff, and before him, General Vance, who I have worked with or around in the past, and I've met multiple times, including overseas in Afghanistan. I have nothing but great things to say about him. I don't care what the rumors are about him. I know I've made my own assessment. And I've seen him again. Like, he is a literal war hero, and he is someone that was very impressive when it came to operations, like at the strategic level, at the tactical level. This guy, like, was incredible, and because he was refusing and addressing key concerns and issues with imposing mandates and forced inoculations on the Canadian Armed Forces members. Oh, sex scandal! What a surprise! And it's something that it was two consenting adults. Obviously, in itself, right? Like it's not excusable behavior. He shouldn't have done that. But that is not a crime. These were two consenting adults, and people within the community, unfortunately, people knew about it for many years, and they were in love with each other. And yeah, and so it's not a scandal, right? Like this, and if you want to, like, there's so many people in the military, and it's not to justify this, but in other levels of government as well that do cheat. Doug Ford cheated on his wife with a staffer. Kennedy cheated on his wife with a staffer. Oh my God, I could go down the list, right? And so don't think I'm right wing when these guys are right. They're conservative, and I did not vote for Doug Ford this election. I can't believe people did. He actually also is someone that is a criminal. But my point is, people have gone to jail, and they're actual heroes that changed the trajectory of Canada and the world. People like Vance and Cadieux and others. I'm sorry, I'm not naming. Whelan, like fired from their positions and alleged sex scandals because they were refusing to impose CAN4 that would restrict the Canadian Armed Forces members as they want, as the liberal freaking government was trying to push, and the NDP alliance and the NDP Bloc alliance, right? So even with the debates yesterday, Bloc Québécois, treasonous sellouts. No offense, I'm from Quebec, I can say that. Carney, liberal sellouts, and he's not any different from Trudeau. He worked with Trudeau for many years. We've already talked about that. Worked with the Bank of Canada, did a terrible job. Deep State Select, Bilderberg, Bank of England, same thing. People from England, if you want to get the real facts about his, how he managed the economy there or enabled the economy there, they have nothing but, they don't have good things to say about him. People that have worked with him, they say even on a personal level, he's not a good guy. So anyways, there's just frustrations all around here. And so should Wayne Eyre get jail? Like, let's say this goes to court finally, and it's a criminal court, not civil. And what would happen, right? Like, he obviously can't be dishonorably discharged like he did to many people in the Canadian Armed Forces ruined their lives, and also people that died because of getting inoculated or that have adverse side effects because of being inoculated. And this is proof. And Catherine, who went on Viva Frei, the lawyer that's representing like the mass tort for Canadian Armed Forces members, she has all the like the receipts. She has over 1 million pages worth of data, and how the VAERS were being suppressed and underreported, and then it was just mind blowing. And so some people are saying that he shouldn't, like, that's not his fault. There was a fault of the Liberal government and the experts there, right? And that they're not his fault because he was getting fed information from analysts and experts, like even in the Canadian Armed Forces, like the medical team, like the surgeon, the ADM, like the highest rankings, like Surgeon General or whatever you want to call it for the medical side of the Canadian Armed Forces. I'm more familiar with the combat arms. Like my apologies for that with the combat arms elements, but for the names of the higher ranking positions. But the top surgeon should have been advising accurately. And people like myself personally emailed Wayne Eyre and countless other people, all levels of cabinet at the time, experts, etc. I emailed them. I shared the receipts already, sent emails. I shared what I attached, and setting all my references, and again, not looked at. So they were given the information, right? It would be one thing if they weren't provided with information, but there was even resistance from at least 3 different generals in the Canadian Armed Forces that were saying no. And then someone finally saying yes. And these people were giving information to counter what the suggested outcome would be, or how things would roll out. And they still went with it. So how is that not treason or malfeasance or some kind of a crime, right? And so what should happen? Jail? It can't be dishonorably discharged. Should he be fined? Like, again, like, and this guy made a lot of money, and like he's probably going to go in some kind of in like business and be seen as an expert and do international travel like other people with my industry do, and get a lot of money selling Canadians out and lying to the friggin' world about things. Anyway, so what are your thoughts on that? Like, jail, no jail? It got pretty intense, this conversation, because I'm on a like I think that there absolutely should be accountability. I think that he was the chief of defense staff. That is the one that initiated this and implemented it and enforced it. And he was wrong, and he was given information that would very clearly show and demonstrate that he was wrong, and he didn't. And then there's also RCMP members, because I've talked about RCMP as well. But there's at least two open letters. Sorry, there's 2 RCMP officers that had written open letters, and they named, I've already shared this, at least 9 members of Parliament. And on the list, Chrystia Freeland, Marco Mendicino, so many others that I've talked about as well. Again, oh my God, I've been ranting on for a long time, but and people like Brenda Lucki and people like Theresa Tam and people that were in cabinet that voted for all of this stuff. These people need to be investigated because they absolutely had the information. Not to be redundant, but again, I'm just upset. Like Pat King, they're still trying to appeal. Tamara Lich still appealing. Again, this is our own government. And it's Canadian taxpayers' dollars, and we don't want to support or enable that. We want them to be given medals. They were not violent. They didn't commit any crimes, despite what, subjective reality like the mainstream media wants to portray, and liars like Justin Trudeau. And Carney is just more of the same. So anyway, I went on ChatGPT and I asked, is Robert J. Carney, what did I say? Yes, it is like Robert J. Carney, is he Mark Carney's father? And I said, and what was his analysis or assessment of the culturally retarded in a CBC? You have to be very specific, in a CBC radio interview, March 5th, 1965. So this is from 1965. And so before I had to ask that, you have to be very clear. I asked, what did Mark Carney's father say, Robert J. Carney, about that? And then it said there's no historical data that would suggest that any connection to Mark Carney and Robert J. Carney, and like to discuss like an assessment of culturally retarded children from an interview, like it's offensive and all of this stuff. Like ChatGPT was trying to give me the girls, and I'm like, I literally asked you if Robert J. Carney is Mark Carney's father, and then it finally responded yes. Okay, did he do an interview on March 5th, 1965 on CBC Radio? And what was his assessment? Like, what did he say regarding culturally retarded children in the school? And then it finally gave me a breakdown. I was like, oh, it's concern, like, it was
Teachers conference not long ago, you told about a program you have working at the Joseph D. Tyrrell School in Fort Smith for culturally retarded children. First of all, would you define a culturally retarded child for me?
A culturally retarded child in the context of the Northwest Territories is a child from a native background.
Wow.
For various reasons, has not been in regular attendance in school. Is from a language background other than English, and who is behind in school, say 3 or 4 years. In many centers in southern Canada, the subculture groups, say in a working class area of a large city, you would have children who you would call culturally retarded. Certainly in the United States, in the large cities, and particularly in the eastern United States, among Negro groups, we have many examples of cultural retardation and programs that have been developed to meet their needs, to try and upgrade their skills and bring them into contact with the dominant culture.
Could you tell me then a little bit about your program, how it got started?
Well, the program actually has been, I suppose, in operation right from the very beginning. Now, in Fort Smith, we have students coming to us from many northern communities, and these students, we have found, many of these students were behind in school 3, 4, 5, and 6 years.
Funny.
To put a 16-year-old girl in into a regular grade 2 classroom, we found it just didn't work, and that we really weren't meeting the educational needs of the child in this type of class environment. And so we established a number of classes, which we've given the name special classes, for want probably of a better word. And these classes are structured in such a way that the academic skills that are so important to any child living in the 20th century, that these skills are taught in an appropriate manner. And at the same time, we realize, because of this cultural retardation, that many of these children will not progress through the regular grade structure. They will not go into high school. And in all probability, they will return to their own communities, remain with their families, and go out into the bush and continue the old way of life. So we're trying to keep them in both worlds. Now, the regular curriculum is modified for them. We want them to be able to read. We want them to be able to speak English. We want them to be able to do the various operations in arithmetic. We want them to know about the world. We want them to know about the world of science. We want them to have the opportunity of expression in music and art. We want them to learn various skills in physical education and so on. But at the same time, we want them to not forget their origins or not to forget their backgrounds, and to instill in them a sense of pride and a sense of belonging, that the culture from which they come is a good culture, and that if they do go back to the old way of life, they go back with skills which will help them in the old way of life.
Now, in a physical way, how is your school run?
We have a separate building, apart from the main building of the Joseph B. Tyrrell School. It has 8 classrooms. We have approximately 100 students, and these are divided into 5 classes.
Teachers conference not long ago, you...
All right, so I have talked about this in a few videos, and I showed conversations that I had with the internet and ChatGPT and other, I think Grok 2 as well, or DeepSeek, or anyway, whatever it was. And I gave a comparison of the, I asked the question, if the world was populated by 500,000 people or 500 million, yeah, it was 500 million, I believe I asked. I said, like, what would be the best system, like, what would be the best religion to, like, what would be the recommended religion to practice? And again, there was no bias in this. I was just generally interested in what the platform would say. And then it gave pros and cons. I asked for pros and cons of each religion, and then concerns. And there were pros and cons for every single religion. And so, but there is an important note to say with that, where there are some that are compatible with each other, and there are some that are absolutely not compatible with each other. And this is where a lot of tension and conflict arises, right? And so I'll give the example of Canada, where we've had it where people that immigrated in the 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, like up until now, hundreds, and came here. Absolutely, there were tensions, there was conflicts that Guns, Germs, Steels talked about, but I believe that it's a little bit misinformed, and a little bit of propaganda in there as well. And while there were conflicts, there absolutely were conflicts. I'm not suggesting otherwise. This was not only between, let's say, for example, people from Europe, but there was also between people from people within Canada that were living there and people that were living in the U.S. at the time, and the borders were not as defined, obviously, and then there was also conflicts between tribes, Indigenous communities within Canada as well. So there was a lot of conflict, like I was saying, but people were also less, like the societies were less developed, right? So the culture may have been, so the religion might have been strong, but again, like when you have societies or religions that focus on things like that are good things, but like whether they don't believe in violence or killing, unnecessary. Well, sorry, not like even with animals, or they don't believe in a lot of the stuff that we're doing now, like with infrastructure. God, it's so hard to explain this stuff because I'm trying to think about the conversation. I could just go back to it, but it was an older conversation on ChatGPT. But anyways, the long story short is that even within Canada, there have been people that came from different countries and they were able to get along reasonably well. I'm talking about like what more can you ask for? That we came to a point where we're not fighting with each other, right? So we have a lot of Indigenous communities and tribes all over Canada, and we do have like a province, an entire province of Quebec, right, where it's largely French speaking. And they're trying to maintain that, right, and the culture, which is very much compatible with the rest of Canada, right, because it's still based on not just Christian values, but even with the Indigenous communities, right, they're very much like their religious or spiritual practices involve, like caring for nature, being peaceful, all these things, and but where the Christian religious kind of like aligned or got connected with the system of government and the legal framework, this is where there was also, again, like there were periods where like Canada has so much beautiful infrastructure that was created by people that came here with their own religious and cultural norms, but again, compatible. And and so we can show that it can actually exist. And so even with what's going on in Israel and Palestine and other areas of the Middle East, what's going on in Ukraine and Russia, I do believe that there are peaceful alternatives to this, right? Because in Canada, we've already demonstrated that. And again, there's pros and cons to every religion. And but again, when you look at the cons of certain religions that make it where they're incompatible with Christian values or ideologies or our Indigenous communities or our French culture, or whatever, then this is where we have to identify and address these concerns, right? And without sounding racist, right? When we're talking about objective facts and stats, and that's our argument against what I would call subjective statements. Then, like again, this is where we're dealing with the issues that we're dealing with now. And so by taking people out of their own culture and things like that, and trying to indoctrinate them in ways that might not necessarily be conducive to having a better life within the environments that they're living in, then I also see concerns with that. And anyway,
Teachers conference not long ago.
but if you take a look at so many different countries and compare it with Canada and why we have been as peaceful and progressive and advanced in many different ways than so many other countries. So this is Mark Carney. It's from his book on values. Ironic, when he sent his daughter to Tavistock when she was a child. Western society is morally rotten, and it has been corrupted by capitalism. The irony in that. This requires rigid controls of personal freedom. So he's talking literally right from the get-go. He's talking about rigid controls of personal freedoms. I'm libertarian, so again, that like red flag. This is not a promise to make the lives of ordinary people better, but temporarily worse. Like you've already done enough though, right? This will be a world of severely constrained choice, less flying, less meat, more inconvenience, and temporarily more poverty. Assets will be stranded, gasoline cars will be unsustainable, unsellable, and inefficient properties will be unrentable. That is who wants to be our prime minister. Someone that was selected, not elected. And it's unbelievable. Montreal Canadiens are in the playoffs. I'm pretty sure because they won. They needed to tie. Anyway, a good post. Thanking the government for solving a problem that they themselves created has to be some form of undocumented mental illness. So this is from Cop Time News. This very radical leftist here, not a liberal. But he's going to vote liberal, obviously. So gas is over 20 cents a liter cheaper today. You can thank Mark Carney for that. The guy that literally was involved in introducing the carbon scam tax, talking about climate chaos and carbon, chaos, all that stuff. Billions of dollars a year, and a large percentage of it going to bureaucracy and salaries, and not towards helping anything. And anyway,
hey, ChatGPT.
About his recommendations.
Hey, ChatGPT. Can a pressurized space vehicle have the door opened from the inside?
Yes, but only after the vehicle has had time to equalize with the external environment. That's interesting. Before I show you evidence that the whole Katy Perry female, independent women in space mission was fake, I want to say this, and this is super important. It doesn't matter. It's a distraction. They're distracting you from the fact they never released the Epstein files, for one. They're distracting you from the fact they committed blatant market manipulation all last week. They're distracting you from the fact that Trump's floating the idea of sending American citizens to the prison in El Salvador. But here's the video of the lie. Enjoy.
Ready? Hey, ChatGPT. Hey,
we're going to skip ahead to after the capsule supposedly parachuted to the ground with his celebrity still inside. The big mistake was that the women inside prematurely opened the capsule, and the Blue Origin handler rushed over to the door to tell them to close it. Let's watch.
Oh my God! I saw the stars. I saw the curvature of the Earth. What's going to come out of her mouth, but really her heart.
And is that Jeff Bezos out there right by the capsule? Kind of hard to see.
Yeah, trying to distract. So yeah, no helmets, no proper suits, super tight, showing your boobs. Like, oh my God. Anyway, and they open a paper thin door by themselves, and yeah, it's all very.
We're going to skip ahead to after the.
Allegedly, they go like anywhere between 2,000 to 2,500 miles per hour. These rockets from Jeff Bezos' company, and so the G-force, like what I'm getting told from my research, it's anywhere between 3 and 4 G's is what they're calling it, and that could be where this can cause like blackouts and things like that, especially for extended periods. So for a few seconds, like it wouldn't be as bad, but like they were in space, they were accelerating for 4 minutes before reaching just before the Kármán line, which people believe to be the kind of like divider between inner and outer space, right? And the Kármán line I've talked about for friggin' years, like approximately 60 miles allegedly above Earth. And so just very interesting stuff. So again, they were very unsafe. As someone that had to wear a friggin' helmet all the friggin' time, even on training, again, train as you fight. So like that, I can't fathom people going in a friggin' rocket like that. But anyway,
today I'm going to show you how.
It's because they didn't want to mess their friggin' hair up. Oh my God. And they didn't go to space, by the way.
Katy Perry went to space, and now womankind is not a disgrace, because Katy Perry went to space with Gayle King. Now women can do anything. Take your titties and your uterus too, and fly those things all the way to the moon.
Today I'm going to show you how Mark
Not
Carney.
what I wanted to share, but that was pretty funny.
Today I'm going to show you how Mark Carney,
I'm going with it.
Elon Musk, and Donald Trump are business partners. It really appears Mark Carney's acting in America's best interest and his own, not Canada's. What you're looking at here is my master chart of Mark Carney. If we zoom out, this is what it looks like. This is all his ties, financial ties, any sort of ties to anything. On the right side here is the ties to America. We got all the boards he sits on, along with all the boards his wife sits on. And down here is all Brookfield Asset Management, all their assets and connections. First, we're going to start off with Mark Carney. He was the vice chair at ESG, Brookfield Asset Management, starting from August 2020 to 2022. Then we became chair until 2025. So we've got Elon Musk. He's over here. Elon Musk has Twitter, SpaceX, Tesla, and The Boring Company. It all centers around Stripe. Everything goes to Stripe. All of these guys are invested and pushing everything towards Stripe to make money. Twitter had that big buyout, and Elon Musk needed money. Who did he get money from? Brookfield Asset Management. Mark Carney bailed out Elon Musk with that money he needed for Twitter. Qatar, as it shows here, invested money in Brookfield Asset Management, and then Brookfield bailed out the Kushner companies for $1.1 billion. Jared Kushner, it's his dad's company. It's his company now, too. He's married to Ivanka Trump, Donald Trump's daughter. Donald Trump needed a bailout for his son-in-law. Brookfield came through.
Possibly.
No, I'd rather deal with a liberal than a
for China.
A conservative that's running is stupidly no friend of mine.
Yeah.
Today I'm going to show you how.
Literally, it's giving cringe.
Yeah, because he's not, and he hasn't bailed you out like Brookfield did, and Elon Musk too, getting bailed out his company by Brookfield too.
Literally, it's giving cringe. Please stop. I have secondhand embarrassment. They were gone for 25 years. They had to come back and kiss the ground, aka 11 minutes. I have questions. Like, why is there no footage of them actually in the rocket on the way up? And if they all said this was their dream, why did they spend that whole 6 minutes staring into a camera? Even the jet pilots that go super high in the air have to wear those oxygen masks. Where are these women's oxygen masks? Helmets. Shouldn't they have helmets on, especially with how hard impact is supposed to be? Screw safety. Just get your hair done really cute, so when you're up in space, you get that perfect angle. And why on earth is there always some way to find a connection between these people in Hollywood and things like this? We shouldn't be able to flip a logo upside down and see a demon. I mean, just throwing that out there. If it wasn't intentional, maybe have your graphic design people work on that. My favorite thing about all this is how Katy Perry is acting like she did something so pivotal, so important for the history of women. And instead, she's just getting dragged all over the internet. She put this on X. It says there's no place like home. Oh my God, nothing says home like a casual ride in a $100 million rocket while the rest of us can't even afford eggs. You know it's bad when you have to scroll for a very long time.
That was funny.
Oh yeah, mama. I see your tight little ass in space. Are you trying to tell me that 6 bitches went in space this morning? Fuck yeah! Roar! Lady Gaga just headlined Coachella, and now there's 6 bitches in space? This is gonna be an amazing fucking week for women. We love you, Gail King. Go off. I'm sure Oprah's nearby. Maybe space is one of Oprah's favorite things. Hold on. Jeff Bezos' girlfriend also went in space? Wait a second. She's a children's author, and her book is really good. Maybe I can buy it off of Amazon! Katy Perry? Yes, bitch. Let us know what the next album is. I'm sure it's gonna be about space. Fuck yeah! I want more of this! Oh yeah, mama.
That was funny.
Oh yeah.
Dogs. There's my dogs. This is our walk this morning. Which is why I'm a little bit later than usual, because I took a bit longer of a walk. And they both were swimming too. All right. Chrystia Freeland, are you a U of T student who hasn't voted yet? No, I'm just kidding. I won't say it like that. Get ahead of exam season and vote today in the student comments. This poll is open until Wednesday from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. She's talking to U of T students to friggin' vote. Oh my God, Chrystia. Thank you to the wonderful U of T liberals who are sharing this important message. Blech. So my comment to her was, you should be in jail, Christia. You had access to information during COVID that was critical, and you chose to ignore and double down while you destroyed the economy and funded literal war crimes. Literal war crimes, multiple. I could go on, but I've covered it on Rumble, where there's still free speech. Yeah, so she's not in jail, named by the RCMP as being corrupt and should step down. Yet we've got so many people that are still in the courts that were fighting them in a lawful way. So I just wrote this down just to clarify for people. So facts are objective. Objective means independent of personal feelings, opinions, or biases. They are based in observable phenomena and can be verified using reliable evidence or data. Subjective facts or statements are influenced by personal feelings or interpretations. Like, this is right from the friggin' books, right? And so, therefore, facts and stats cannot be racist, sexist, or discriminatory. Canada's cabinet, in collaboration with MSM News and self-appointed experts, continue to push subjective statements while censoring objective facts that counter them. And, yeah. So I hope friggin' someone else besides Carney wins. Like, we are friggin'... Anyway. Okay. On to the debate. Took me long enough.
We arguably happened within the last.
One another, I'll ask Pascal, our sound engineer, to
participating. For instance, Maxime Bernier's party for the People's Party of Canada, who has complained about this. I hope that Canadians will be well.
Started purchasing that, who pre-ordered. We were over, I think, 430 pre-orders for the book. Thank you so much for supporting our effort to educate Canadian youth in a non-partisan way. Thank you very much, everybody. And we are waiting for our initial shipment of books so that we can start offering the signed copies for people. And those who have pre-ordered, you should be receiving your books very shortly, if not already. So thank you. Chris, back in 1973 for $5 a tier, actually pay for Carney to be on. So that was the TVA debate. This is the official leadership debate. That's different. So the TVA debate is a French-only debate that has happened every election since 2015. And Carney just... It's going to be very interesting to see how this plays out. Because they say that... The great work. Thank you very, very much for that. We have Tony Jurassic for $7. Liberal Logic. I hate Trump because he's greedy and doesn't pay taxes. I love Carney because he's greedy and doesn't pay taxes.
Live from Maison Radio Canada in Montreal, this is the Leaders Debate 2025 with Patrice Roy. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the French Leaders Debate. We are joined by Mark Carney, leader of the Liberal Party, Pierre Poilievre, leader of the Conservative Party, Yves-François Blanchet, leader of the Bloc Québécois, and Jagmeet Singh, leader of the New Democratic Party. Good evening to all four of you.
Good evening.
Thank you for being here. Ladies and gentlemen, it's 6 p.m. in a few seconds. This important event has been moved forward to give as many people as possible the opportunity to tune in without missing a decisive moment for another one of...
It's so Canadian. So what he's going to say is, and I loved it, right? Like, this was going to start at 8, but because of the friggin' Canadians and the friggin' hockey game, and Montreal possibly going to the playoffs. They're ending up, they're going to go in the playoffs, but because that game, I think it was in Montreal last night, but it was at they didn't want to interfere with Canada's hockey. So friggin' Canadian.
Of our passions, hockey. And by the way, I'll go off script here for a few seconds and say that the Montreal Canadiens, you'd better win. I also would like to say that the leaders' invitations were managed by the Leaders' Debates Commission, and the podium places on the set were designated at random. But the questions, subjects, and editorial choices are ours. I'll be managing speaking time fairly, within a fair limit. There are 5 themes tonight. Obviously, the trade war with the United States, the cost of living, energy and climate, immigration and foreign affairs, and finally, identity and sovereignty. And I'll also have a few rapid-fire questions at the end of the debate. This debate is your debate this evening. You will be free to speak as much as possible. The only rule that I ask of you is not to speak at the same time. If you start talking over one another, I'll ask Pascal, our sound engineer, to turn off your mics. So let the debate begin, or I was going to say good game. So we'll move on to our first opening question. You'll have 45 seconds each to answer. This election, according to many, has been hijacked by Trump. So to assert
No, it hasn't.
our sovereignty
Oh my God.
early in this debate, I'll ask you to name 2 things you'd put forward, concrete things that will change the lives of Canadians, but that have nothing to do with the United States. 45 seconds. Mr. Carney, you're first.
Well, first of all, thank you very much, Mr. Leroy. And I'd like to thank everyone watching at home for joining us tonight. And I'd like to thank the other leaders for your service to Canada. 2 things that don't include Mr. Trump. First of all, we need to double the rhythm of construction of new homes here in Canada. That's absolutely fundamental. And the second thing, we need to promote and strengthen our cultural institutions in Canada.
45 seconds, Mr. Poilievre. 2 things that you would promise Canadians to change their lives that have nothing to do with the United States.
Thank you, Mr. Roy, and thanks to my colleagues for being here today. Clearly, life is no longer affordable. The promise of an affordable life is broken. I have a plan to make life more affordable by cutting taxes by 15%. That's one thing that will reward work for the middle class and for seniors who've already worked. Second thing, we're going to scrap the GST on new houses, and we're going to incentivize cities to reduce their taxes too, so that our young people can save up to $100,000 on a new home and restore the promise of Canada.
Mr. Blanchet.
He was like right on time.
I would like to come back to something that I do all year long. First of all, thank you for having welcomed us. I have been waiting for this moment for a long time. I would like to insist on 2 things for Quebec that I was talking about before the Trump crisis is Quebec's right to have a different and open economy, open to the world, based on its own natural resources, on its own attachment to a green economy, but also Quebec's right to be different, to have a different language, to have a different culture, to have different values, to have different immigration models that need to succeed. These are elements that should always have been mentioned, but that have a particularly new sense with this new crisis.
Great. Mr. Singh, 45 seconds. 2 things that have nothing to do with the American.
Thank you for the question. Good evening, everybody. First, I'd like to talk a little bit about values. What are the values that underpin the answer to this question? Canadians and Quebecers like taking care of one another. We come together. That is what we believe in. That is a basic value for us. And this value is embodied in our public health care system, which has nothing to do with the U.S. And we want our healthcare system to be nothing like the American one. We will expand pharmacare so that everyone can access the medications they need. And I also want to talk about dental care. I also want to expand that program, which owes itself to us.
Thank you. I'd like to reassure you, Mr. Singh. I think you were disappointed. We are going to talk about health as well, and I'll ask questions about that later.
He went over time.
First theme,
That's why
therefore,
you interrupted.
obviously, the trade war. Trump is going to be tough. We don't know what's in store with him. I don't think any solution is going to be possible. We always thought they were our ally. It doesn't make sense. You can't reason with him. The government will have to stand firm. Stay firm. We have to put him in his place. Otherwise, he'll destroy us totally. The answer should be pragmatic. It would be good to pause some of our services to the U.S. They need us. An eye for an eye. No messing around. Get us out of this mess. We need a leader who can make decisions to destabilize Trump and make him respect Canada. What does he plan to do with the new president of the United States? What do you plan to do with this president? That is the elephant in the room. So for your information, there are 1,073 days left in Donald Trump's term. Why do you think that you are the best person here tonight to negotiate with Mr. Trump? Mr. Poilievre, 35 seconds.
First of all, we will never be an American state. We will remain sovereign. On my first day as Prime Minister, I will restart negotiations to accelerate a deal that will put an end to the tariffs and protect our sovereignty. We can't control Trump, but at the same time, we have to control what we can control. We need to reverse liberal economic policies that have weakened our country. We need to unleash our resources, cut taxes, and bring jobs back home so that we can face Trump from a position of strength.
Good answer.
All right. Well, first of all, in a crisis, you have to plan for the worst possible situation, and you have to have a plan to build a strong economy here in Canada. And we need to react with strength. And those are the elements that will allow us to succeed with Mr. Trump. He respects strength. He respects people who understand how the world works and who understand how the private sector works. And Canada needs to create other options, new, reliable partnerships around the world, and that's what I'll do.
Thank you, Mr. Carney. Mr. Blanchet.
Mr. Trump will hang from his own noose because their economy is dependent on ours. But there will be a lot of harm done to Canada, to Europe, to Mexico before then. We have to realize that our joint GDP is bigger than the States. Our population is bigger than the States. And so retaliation is going to hurt the States, but we have to negotiate in a rational way, and we shouldn't fall to fear, and we shouldn't spin fear.
Mr. Conclusions?
It's all about priorities. For me, now is the time to invest, not cut. It is the time to protect what we hold dear, our farmers, our culture, the French language. These things should not be sacrificed. It is time to defend who we are, what our values are. And we believe in helping one another. That's what we will do. How? We will strengthen our healthcare system. We will not let it be Americanized. That is crucial. We must defend who we are.
So, open debate to begin now for about 15 minutes. Mr. Poilievre, you have called Carney a political grifter, a globalist banker who's disconnected from reality. And Mr. Carney, you said Pierre Poilievre is a career politician who knows nothing about how the real world works. So I ask you the question, which of you first is capable of standing up to Donald Trump? Mr. Poilievre.
I am, because I'm going to put Canada first. I will never compromise Canada's interests, and I will control what we can control here. Obviously, no one will be able to control the decisions of Donald Trump, but we can control our economy, our domestic economy, by overturning liberal economic policies that have weakened our country and made us more dependent on the Americans.
The issue is, Mr. Poilievre,
Well,
you would make Canada more like the
That's not
United
true.
States. You would Americanize our healthcare system,
not true.
privatize it. Everyone knows that's what conservatives
That's
do.
not true.
Mr. Carney, you said that you're better?
All right. First of all, I know how to negotiate. And I agree with Mr. Singh. We need to start by saying what's never going to be on the table. The French language, Quebec's culture, and supply management will never be on the table. Our resources, that's the first thing. Second, in terms of Mr. Blanchet's point, the opportunities that we have with the European Union are there, and I've already started building new relationships with the European Union. As Prime Minister, I met with the President of France and with the President of the European Commission.
There's a lot to unpack in there, let's be honest. And perhaps it's right. You say that you're an expert in managing a crisis, but you say you're a negotiator, but, well, perhaps negotiating with tax havens. But when it comes to trade agreements, I haven't seen the proof. We apparently have to believe you with no political experience. And so I find it's kind of funny because people say we have to unite and work together. On the one hand, you have never spoken to me before this evening. You're not trying to figure out how to collaborate between equals, Quebec, Canada, Mexico, European partners. You're trying to score divisive points that only serves the United States of America.
Said.
All right. I've just started as Prime Minister. I've been Prime Minister for a month. In the first week,
You've been destroying Canada from the inside out for years. He was hired as an expert financial advisor during COVID in 2020. I've shared the proof. Again, with the Bank of Canada hollowing out the middle class and saving and providing such a mass surplus and profit for the CMHC, for example, his insurance partners, like people that are part of the Bilderberg friggin' groups, WEF, Davos, Bohemian Grove, etc. That deep shadow state, whatever you want to call it, supernationalist committee, right? And then even beyond that, even with the carbon tax scam as well, he was an enabler with that. And so there's a lot of misinformation there. I wanted to get back on housing. I just wanted to make sure I had some of my facts straight first before I got into it, because I already have points. And so I just hope I get this right. You know, there's multiple sources, but for the amount of homes there are in Canada, it's approximately 16.5 million. And these are homes like total, like across Canada. Again, it could be off by a bit. And there's approximately 40 million people now in Canada. Again, this has been a surge in the last 5 years from people that are not Canadian, but that again are also significantly impacting the housing market. And so we need to manage immigration and foreign temporary workers and student visas, people coming in from other countries, because we just can't sustain that. And for so many different reasons, but because of the housing, they're talking about the housing crisis, right? And so out of that, for sale, homes that are for sale, not even just for rent, but homes that are listed just on MLS, so on Kijiji, and there's so many other Grapevine, other sites that have listings of homes for sale that are not part of this. But it's approximately 170,000 homes listed across Canada for sale right now as we speak. Approximately 4,000 in Ottawa. There's approximately 36.5 million in Toronto, just for sale and not renting. Just in Vancouver, 15K, so like probably 10K in well, maybe like 8K in renting. And but again, so, and then there are also abandoned cities and abandoned towns all over Canada that I've said that are even still providing electricity to these towns, and because they were improperly run and managed by the people that they had there. And and allowed opportunity to just completely falter. And mining communities I'm talking about. Anyway, there's things we can do about that. But so the housing issue can be properly addressed by things like immigration, just like the volume and the extent, because again, we just can't sustain it, like for so many different reasons. And and the average homes that are being built within Canada for the last several years anyways is approximately 250,000. And there's very much a monopoly on the builds and who's building and who's part of the destruction companies and the connected to the people that are part of the landfills that are taking over national parks and protected lands and heritage sites and stuff like that. And it's not helping anyone within Canada, right? And people are going to, again, there's going to be a reduction in people coming over the next few years based on our economy and alone, right? And like the increase in crime and like the infighting that's happening in Canada from and the outfighting, like people from different countries where their ideologies and religions also clash, right? And there's faction gangs like fighting against each other in Canada that are not even Canadian, not even going to stay here for any extended period of time, that are here as criminals, including coming across the border from the U.S., right? And so they're going to get into that, and then I'll talk about Mexico and Canada and stuff like that. But these alleged tariff wars and crisis with Trump, involved, like this is such nonsensical. Like he also just got in as president. So Connie's like, oh, I've only been prime minister for a month. First of all, you were selected. No one wants you as prime minister that I've talked to, trust me. And Trump just got elected. January 20th, and he was officially elected. Not elected. He was officially inaugurated. And so his term is friggin' new too. And oh my God, this guy, he's just a moron. He's just a moron. Gotta stop talking. I had 2 coffees this morning, though. I do blame that.
I signed an agreement with the premiers of all the provinces, the premier of Quebec and the premiers of all the provinces and territories concerning free trade within Canada. It's also an agreement that deals with trade corridors. That's an example. That's an example.
You haven't sat with any premiers. You've sat with MPs that will be elected at the same level as you if you're elected.
The problem, Mr. Carney, is that your party has been in power for 10 years. And in that time, it's not meetings that are going to change things. It's your policies that have blocked resources. C-69, which blocks not just pipelines, but also dams, mines, and liquid natural gas exploration. We have a deal with Europe, a trade deal. The Conservatives negotiated it, but Liberal legislation has prevented development, and you continue to support those laws. Those laws need to be repealed and replaced with laws that will unleash our resources and allow us to export abroad and allow us to become truly economically and
talk about that later.
Sovereign and
In a war,
have
you need
energy
to determine
sovereignty
your
as well.
priorities. Mr. Carney, unfortunately, your priority is, well, you had time to meet with the king, but you did not increase the amount of money people receive when they lose their jobs due to the trade war. These days, people receiving EI get maybe half of their salary. For people who have already lost their jobs, that is not enough. It won't cover the bills. It won't cover their rent costs. That shows your priorities. For me, workers are number one. We need a system to support our workers.
We'll hear some in a few seconds, but Mr. Carney, response, and then I have another question for Blanchet.
Well, first of all, we need to fight in a trade war. We need to fight with counter tariffs. And all the money collected from our counter tariffs will go directly to workers and the businesses that are the most affected by this trade war. They won't be used for tax cuts the way that Mr. Poilievre is going to do.
You always want to increase them. You're liberal. We want to cut taxes.
Started as Prime Minister
for a fourth Liberal term.
I've just started.
You were Justin Trudeau's economic advisor. Have you forgotten that?
Honestly, let me cut in here. Both of them would cut taxes for billionaires and millionaires. They have already done it in the past. Your first step was to reduce taxes for the millionaires. Pierre Poilievre would do the same thing.
That's not
You're
true.
not thinking of regular people.
We've cut the consumer carbon
Great.
tax. That's
Mr.
what we
Singh,
did.
Mr. Blanchet, we've been telling Canadians for several days that it would be better to have a minority government. You said it clearly. With Trump, can Canadians not want a majority government that's stronger?
I don't know where that reasoning comes. The minority government would be weaker than a majority government. Go tell that to the Germans, who have only governed through coalitions recently. Many countries have coalitions, and if that is the population of the people, then great. At this point, it's possible that Canadians and Quebecers, perhaps, choose to trust in someone who has the least experience in politics. Quebec has a different economy, different interests, different everything. We want a parliament where our economic difference is taken into account.
Let's talk a little bit about
Mr. Singh,
minority
in terms of the minority
governments.
government,
The whole point of a minority government is to help people, to make a difference in people's lives. But honestly, Mr. Blanchet, unfortunately, in the last minority government, you showed that you were as useless as the monarchy is. You did nothing for people. What is worse, you voted against measures that would help Quebecers. Dental care, pharmacare. These are measures that have helped hundreds of thousands of Quebecers.
Quebec jurisdiction, dental care, health care,
people in Quebec,
pharmacare,
people
money
in
that we
Quebec.
send to Ottawa. Ottawa does not have the expertise or the jurisdiction.
We are
Quebec
paying the
does.
Mr. Roy,
Please let me finish one sentence.
Please wrap it up.
When we want to be effective, we give the money to the experts, those who have the legal jurisdiction to spend the money, and that is Quebec in this case. The NDP gave $2 billion to a insurance company.
Giving
Everything
money
was
to our
going
Quebec seniors.
fine until now, but Mr. Carney, in terms of the minority government,
Mr. Roy, we are in a crisis, the most serious crisis of our lives. We need to react with resounding, overwhelming strength. Yes, we need to cut a few taxes. Yes, we need to cut bureaucracy. But the government needs to act in a time of crisis. So we need to have a government ready to act.
But when you were Justin Trudeau's economic advisor, you weakened our economy. We need economic sovereignty, and that means bringing back production to Canada. And I would reverse Liberal policies around development. I would expedite construction permits. We would have pre-approved permits. And that would, and I would also make sure that we could send our energy to Europe to break Europeans' dependence on Putin, and to break our dependence on the
The
U.S.
Conservatives and the Liberals both prioritize the ultra-rich, not you, not
Great,
regular
we do
Canadians.
have a segment on that.
That's the difference.
We have a segment on energy and pipelines, so we'll come back to that later. There are people who are watching us who are concerned. There will be negotiations with the Americans, obviously. What? Well, you'll all say supply management here, but I'd like to say that Canada gave up market shares during the last 3 trade deal negotiations. We're talking about more than $450 million a year in losses for Canadian farmers. So what is something you wouldn't concede in a
I
negotiation?
will defend supply management. I will defend the French language. I will defend our healthcare system. I will defend our decisions and our laws. We will always be sovereign. And the way we're going to restore that sovereignty, Canadian sovereignty, is by making our economy stronger. We need to cut red tape by 25% for businesses. We need to reduce development charges, taxes on housing. We need to support labor and energy
Great.
and domestic production. That's how we can be more
Supply
sovereign.
management. Well, I'll go around the table,
facing,
Mr. Carney.
in the face of the U.S.
It's nice to say supply management, but we've said it 3 times and it hasn't been done. So
Well, this is the first time that I will be at the table if I'm elected as Prime Minister. I've said a number of times, and since the beginning of my campaign in Mauricie, we'll never touch supply management. We won't put Quebec culture or the French language on the table. And I think we all agree on that point. And that's important. We have to be very clear from the beginning when talking to the Americans.
One area that we don't agree on is that Pierre Poilievre would cut our healthcare system.
That's not
You
true.
said it, everyone knows it. You said that you want to cut, you would cut dental care.
Not true.
Pharmacare. You called them bad ideas. And unfortunately, Mr. Carney's plan to budget the operating budget in 3 years
Mr. Singh,
would lead to $43 billion
we'll talk about
worth
that in
of
the next
cuts.
segment. Cost of living, we'll talk about tax cuts later and choices, and we will underscore that none of you has tabled a costed plan. These are just promises. Mr. Blanchet on supply
We have
management.
tabled a program, first of all. Second of all, we are not the ones who decide what's on the table. If Mr. Trump says, I want to talk about this, no one will be able to stop him from at least talking about it. We've never sacrificed the principle of supply management. So it's empty words. Little bits have been sacrificed every single time at a cost of hundreds of millions of dollars every single time. All Mr. Trump wants is a wave of Wisconsin milk with hormones, with no protection against antibiotics.
So what would you do concretely?
We will bring back an act that everyone approved. The Liberals before Carney approved it. Everyone had approved it, but then there were certain intrigues with unelected senators. There's a number of unelected members of Parliament that seem to be making decisions.
What would protect it better?
Well, maybe I agree with that law, but my point is that we need to invest in Canada. Our plan, which will be unveiled this weekend, will catalyze $500 billion of investment in Canada over the next 5 years. And that will be important in our negotiations with Mr. Trump.
I'd like us to listen to a worker together from Stellantis. For him, this crisis with the U.S. is very clear. He's just lost his job.
I was laid off by Stellantis because of the trade war with the U.S. How will your government stop Mr. Trump from attacking our industries one by one? And how will you protect our jobs? Concrete measures. How will you help workers? You all have different proposals. Mr. Poilievre.
First of all, I already announced a fund to help companies keep jobs, to keep workers in their jobs, because the priority of workers is to keep working. Secondly, there will be EI to protect people who have fallen on rough times. I will be there for people who've lost their jobs. At the same time, we need to stimulate investment to strengthen our economy and to encourage new companies. We need to unleash our natural resources, and we need to create more jobs in resource industries. We also want to create more jobs for tradespeople at a time when they need work to build new houses.
Let's stay on workers. Mr. Singh.
If a business wants to sell cars in Canada, they should be required to have a factory in Canada, a presence in Canada, and I would put this in a law. We are a major market. If you want to sell here, you should create jobs here. And let me add, the first thing Mr. Poilievre said in 2022 when he became Conservative leader is that he would cut EI contributions. So it is not credible that he would increase support to people when he talked about eliminating contributions.
Mr. Blanchet, for workers, you've said you want to go back to a pandemic-style wage subsidy.
The principle of that. We said that even before the campaign. To paraphrase Mr. Poilievre, EI is fairly broken. People have difficulty accessing it, and I disagree with Mr. Carney's suggestion to say that money will be invested in training. You've lost your job, but we're going to train you, and you're going to have another kick at a can at the age of 55. Not a good idea. The idea of the wage subsidy was to allow the worker to have a link to their job by giving them a subsidy so that the employer, should they want to, could rehire them someone who had the skill to do the job. So there would be a transitional period where there could be temporary job losses, like for the case we've just heard.
Well, first of all, three things. All the money from our counter tariffs will go directly to workers. Second, we have a strategic fund for manufacturing in Canada, specifically for the auto sector. And third, our counter tariff system for the automotive sector contains an incentive of
The Automobile Association of Ontario, it didn't get brought up, that's why I'm talking about it. They sent a letter, they made it public, you can look for yourself, I've already shared it, that's saying that like they don't want to do a trade war with the US, right? And they weren't being as impacted as people are alleging. And again, I don't understand why people like this got monopolized and turned into a Trump thing again. and it's just so disappointing as a Canadian that they still pushed, and it was one of the first. It was the first question, and our media.
$1 billion for the automakers to keep production and workers here in Canada. That's very important.
Under his tenure at the Bank of Canada, and then during COVID, he completely hollowed out and destroyed the middle class, and gave Chrystia Freeland, who was the deputy minister and finance minister, did the worst job in Canadian history with him, and they're very close, and he's even the godfather of her son, and again, it's just I can't believe that people want to pretend that he has not been involved in the destruction of Canada since the early 2000s and is not Canadian.
But the reason that we've done all of this is so that we can have strong positions to negotiate with Trump.
Just to conclude, I think we need to encourage Canadians to buy Canadian-made cars. And that's why, as long as there are tariffs, we will scrap the GST on cars and trucks that are built here, mainly built here in Canada.
I think the tariff is a good idea. What allows companies to buy and sell more, then yes, I do agree with that approach.
70%.
Mr. Poilievre copied our idea. We announced the GST lifting for Canadian-made cars before him.
Now, there are a lot of things that are in all of your platforms, so we'll come back to that. Now, 70% of Canadians say that they're buying fewer American products. That's a big number. You leaders, could you please name me one made-in-USA product that you no longer buy?
I buy my own strawberries.
So you don't buy strawberries?
I buy Quebec strawberries, and I do my own shopping, by the way.
So what products have you not bought, Mr. Carney?
No more wine, no more alcohol, no more American alcohol.
I do my own shopping, and I cook at home. Lots of products. Fruits, there's a lot of Canadian apples.
So you're making an effort?
Yes, I'm making an effort with apples, other fruit, strawberries.
Strawberries. Everyone is eating a lot of strawberries these days.
Monsieur Carney objecte que vous ne le faites pas.
I bring it up because I do my own grocery shopping, which Carney does not.
This is a delicious conversation. It's beef in my case. I buy Canadian beef. It's the best beef in the world. But I never buy American strawberries either.
Organic beef from Quebec is also not bad.
Well, let's share some of that.
All right. It's very beautiful to see. Our next theme is the cost of living.
Nursing buys his own bags of potatoes.
You should buy one Canadian.
He can manage our money. Oh, we're having a hard time here. I hope they'll be able to balance the budget and maintain the same quality of services. Inflation, lower taxes. I earn a good salary, but it's hard to pay for groceries, for childcare.
He's talking about inflation and lower taxes, and Carney is talking about culture, and he's talking about housing, which he's the one, and with the Century 21 initiative, which Pierre mentions as well, with this mass migration, this replacement migration under the UN, which is also affiliated with Canada's Green Party, by the way, which is where the carbon tax gets diverted. I'll get into that when they get into that. But I just wish we had people that were more qualified.
For our kid, for everything.
Knew this.
Education is expensive. Prices keep going up. Yeah. The middle class is hurting. And for the poor, it's worse. We're retired and we're counting every penny. We're getting poorer. I feel like no one really listens to young people on housing or the cost of living. So what does the future hold for us young people? What does the future hold for young people? I'll give you a few figures here very briefly.
But the answer to the housing crisis, to be clear, is not with like a massive surge of housing when we need to manage what we've already our resources, our current existing resources, and then manage the inflow again of people that are coming here on a permanent or temporary basis and that are taking over housing that could go to Canadians. and it would lower the prices.
I'm sure this won't come as a surprise, but in Montreal, housing prices have more than doubled over 10 years, from over $300,000 to $671,000.
Who was in the Bank of Canada? Oh, interesting. And then the Bank of England, and then COVID. So 5 years ago.
There's remarkable growth in Toronto and Vancouver as well. So my question, and you'll have 35 seconds, first of all, how can we improve access to housing, for example, for this young woman that we just heard from, Mr. Blanchet?
Clearly, it's through the starting capital and another GST-based policy. There needs to be access to capital for their down payment. My children can't pay for a house. A lot of them have jobs, good jobs. It's essential that we give them a little boost. Using public money, for example, and it's not during a crisis and in cutting budgets that we will be able to do so. We need to reduce speculation on house prices. We need to invest in affordable housing, social housing, student housing to give a good price and reduce pressure.
Thank you, Mr. Blanchet. Mr.
He says a lot without saying anything at all.
I'm with you, with all those who are having a hard time affording their groceries, or young people who can't buy a house. After a decade of liberal inflation, liberal policies have increased the cost of living the most in 40 years. I will cut your taxes for the average by 15%. We will scrap the GST on new homes, and we will incentivize municipalities to speed up permits and construction so that young people can once again buy a home and restore the dream of home ownership.
In order to fix this crisis in the cost of living, we need to make sure that Canadians have more money in their pockets, and they need to have more Canada in their pockets. So that means a tax cut for the middle class, and our plan is almost $800 per family. Cut the GST on first homes and increase competition. And in Canada, we have dental care, pharmacare, and daycares. We need to protect that, and we need to double new housing construction in Canada with our plan.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Singh.
Thank you. When I talk to people and the cost of living comes up,
This investment, and with a small amount of catalyzing investment from the government of Canada, we can create.
Yeah, he's talking about state-funded and controlled housing. He also has shares and stocks in, and he has companies that are affiliated with, or people that he's partners with that have, again, the like they're the ones that are like own these companies or also would benefit from them. So he is so friggin' slimy.
Huge private investment and a new Canadian industry.
All right, Mr. Blanchet, then Mr. Pliev.
Another proposal that I find interesting is to allow parents who have money in savings for their retirement to take the money temporarily to help for their kids' down payment. That's not $500 billion that will be required. These are not civil servants that will be fired.
we're now in the midst of a crisis, a healthcare crisis. It is being felt here in Quebec and all. This is one rare moment where we agree. On February 16th, you sat down with Rosemary Barton and you said that you would cut spending in the operational budget.
Operational spending. That's different.
You said,
one at a time, please,
that this would affect transfers for healthcare and to individuals.
No, Mr. Roy, no,
I have a question.
That's not right at all. That's not
Please.
right at all.
Mr. Carney, you'll have the opportunity to answer later. The question that people are asking themselves, and you may have heard this, Mr. Singh, you've promised that every Canadian will have a family doctor, that there will be vastly more nurses. Does the federal government need to continue developing more national plans like pharmacare and dental care? Or option two, should they be giving more money to the provinces for healthcare? Mr. Carney, you'll start off. More programs or more money?
First of all, the priority for the federal government is to invest and to catalyze investment in the most serious crisis we're facing in our lives. We need to catalyze private investment in our economy to create new and good jobs. That's the first thing we need to do. In terms of transfers to provinces for
We do that
healthcare,
by raising taxes.
yes, there are limits to the federal government's activity. No new programs. No.
Mr. Blanchet?
It's easy. All premiers from the provinces and territories unanimously asked for a 35% health transfer. I would like to re-explain it. The federal government receives more money than it needs. It needs $10, it gets 12. Quebec needs $10, but it only gets 8. So the federal government could take its surplus and say, I would like to invest in your jurisdictions. The Liberals and the Conservatives agree on this, and the NDP loves butting its nose into provincial jurisdiction. The Constitution sets out jurisdictions. The easiest way is to give the money without conditions.
You've said that we do need to step in, that we need to have more programs like this.
Let me explain. Absolutely, we need to increase health transfers. Absolutely, in order to help out the provinces. What is more, we are now in the midst of a crisis, a healthcare crisis. It is being felt here in Quebec and all throughout the country. We should recognize that a leader is someone who looks for solutions, not excuses. I believe that we should be investing more in fixing problems. And yes, we can work with the provinces to hire more healthcare workers. We can work with them to get through this crisis. Pharmacare is one area where everyone can come together to bring down the cost of...
Yeah, less funding for the lobbyists, shareholders, stockholders, and the people that they're alleging are the experts. And look what happened during COVID. And so absolutely mismanaged. And so I do believe that this should be more regulated at the provincial level to ensure there's more checks and balances and more people that are looking into the medical and scientific communities and industries and who's profiting from what they're sharing, just like what RFK Jr. is doing in the US is what I would apply to Canada. So I'm moving on from this because none of them had good answers.
No, I've said no.
Against
I've said
it?
no.
You forget the project?
Well, no.
You cannot force projects on people.
Listen, it's a question.
I have another question about the environment. Here's the question. You have said that you are a pragmatic person. Do you agree that it is not pragmatic to continue to subsidize oil companies with billions of dollars? That's not pragmatic at all. Would you agree?
Well, I agree.
Some of this is really
fear-mongering or blaming immigrants for things. We need a facts-based, needs-based approach.
That's true.
Temporary foreign workers are temporary. They're a different category. Foreign students are a separate category, and they are essential for our post-secondary establishments in Quebec and in Canada. Unfortunately, it's being used as a roundabout way to get asylum, and asylum is also taken advantage of through smuggling and organized crime. We don't want to import vulnerable workers because we simply need people. Asylum seekers should be people who are in distress that we need to welcome based on our welcoming capacity. We are not currently in Quebec able to welcome as many people that are arriving. Quebec needs to be able to establish what its targets are. And one clear element, the federal parliament, with a Bloc Québécois initiative, decided to force the federal government to consult provinces within 100 days to determine how many immigrants would be welcomed. No one can decide, apart from Quebec, how much Quebec can accept and welcome.
Another rare moment where I agree with Mr. Blanchet. Temporary foreign workers are often victims of power abuses. We would restrict the use of workers who are exploited by major corporations.
The Centre Initiative was 100 million immigrants in Canada before the end of the century. Dominic Barton, a parliamentary committee, said that they did not take into account the uniqueness of Quebec, and one of the two co-authors of the Centre Initiative and 100 million people is now one of Mr. Carney's close advisors.
Mr. Carney?
And I'm going to go back to the border thing too, because like throughout our borders, there are thousands of people illegally entering Canada, or that are being, in smaller circumstances, being detained at the borders or getting caught. They need to enter lawfully. There are borders and areas where they can enter lawfully and seek asylum or refugee status. The people that are not are criminals. They are criminals. Okay, whether it just be by that in and itself, right? And so there are people that are going through Mexico or that are Mexican that are criminals or that are vulnerable, that are getting exploited for human trafficking, drug trafficking, arms trafficking, etc. And they're coming in either from other countries, or again, they're in the more vulnerable populations and being used, right? And then going into the U.S. And now with the U.S., now that Trump has been elected president, there has been a strict lockdown on people entering illegally, and stricter measures on who can immigrate, and more rigorous background checks, all of this stuff, which is necessary for the safety of your country. That's what taxpayers are paying for, and what people expect, right? Is that that we live in a safe country and a free country, and that does not come without sacrifice of brave men and women, mostly men, that put themselves on the front lines in order to serve and protect and defend, or at least that's what they should be doing. And so they're going and they're fleeing into Canada now. And so these people are already criminals. They've already entered into the U.S. illegally. They were enabled to somehow get in and past so many different not checkpoints, but like areas within the U.S. to get to Canada from Mexico, and they're criminals, and they're people that are part of the arms smuggling, drug smuggling, human trafficking, etc. And so we need to manage this better, and we can't tolerate that. Bring in people that are clearly seeking asylum or refugee status, etc. Like, I'm not saying that because there are legitimate people that do need help, and that would be to remove themselves from the danger. But Mexico as well. There are suburbs. There are major cities in Mexico. There are people that thrive. The majority of the population thrive in Mexico. And so I always wonder why Mexico doesn't double down on just like how their culture and how their country is being so slandered in mainstream media. It's I would wonder why you wouldn't want to push back and just show how much culture, how enriched your population is, and how there's many safe places to live where people can thrive. They just choose. Well, I don't just choose. Again, like some people, again, they're in vulnerable populations, and I think it's because they realize that if they push back on it, then maybe more people will stay that are possible criminals or whatever, and so they just don't want that issue, right? So if people are just going to leave, that are not going to bring for the society or bring anything to the table in their country, and are just going to cause harm and suffering and things like that, then why wouldn't the new president leader is a woman, I believe, and why wouldn't you want these specific people to leave? And so we don't, these are not the people we want to inherit, the people that actually deserve to be in a place where they're safe, not people that are going to exploit us, harm us, or part of these rings that are causing so much harm all over the world. And there are links with the UN assisting and enabling these operations to happen, right? And so I talked about the Green Fund in Canada and how that's where the carbon tax, our money, goes. Again, it's a scam, and it started in Quebec first, unfortunately, in 2007, and then the rest of Canada by 2015, including Ontario. And I just want to get into my screen captures because I just wanted to make sure that I had this right. And so the Canadian province of Quebec became the first in Canada to introduce a carbon tax. The tax was to be imposed on energy producers starting 1 October 2007, with revenue collected used for energy efficiency programs, including public transit. The tax rate for gasoline in Canada currency was 0.8 cents per liter, or about $3.50 per ton. Okay, so write that down. $3.50 per ton of CO2 equivalent. The tax was also applied also applied. So at 0.9 cents per liter of diesel fuel, 0.96 cents per liter of light heating oil, 1 cent per liter of heavy heating oil, 1.3 cents per liter of coke used in making steel, 0.5 cents per liter of propane, and $8 per ton of coal. The proceeds were paid into a green fund, which provided the resources for the implementation of the provincial climate change plan. A complete list of measures and details can be found in the official plan, 2006 to 2012, titled Quebec and Climate Change, A Challenge for the Future. I'm going to stop sharing this for a bit. So I might not play the rest because it just gets a little redundant. And anyway, and so carbon tax have increased since the 2007 plan was introduced. And so, yes, it has. Oh, wrong way. Quebec does not pay the same carbon tax rate as Ontario. So even the carbon tax that people are paying, it varies at the federal level, provincial level. And so it does not pay the same carbon tax rate as Ontario. Quebec has its own carbon pricing system, which is a cap and trade system. But while Ontario also had a cap and trade system, but it was canceled in 2018. I was going to bring that up, but it's brought up here as well. So we had a cap and trade system in Ontario. Again, it was canceled in 2018. As of April 1st, 2024, Ontario residents pay a federal carbon tax. Again, this was last year, but it's only paused. Was set at $80 per ton of CO2 equivalent. And it was scheduled to increase to $170 per ton by 2030. And so this is also under the Green Fund. It's also under the Agenda 2030, WEF's agendas, all this stuff that Mark Carney is very much affiliated with. And this is very concerning. In Quebec, the carbon tax rate is different and is part of their cap and trade system. As of February 2021, it was lower, but it increased. It increased to, $57 per ton. So Ontario used to have a cap and trade system. Quebec still does have one. They're the ones that pushed this to begin with. Again, whoever did that needs to be criminally investigated. But so they pay $57 per ton. Ontario, $80 per ton. They want it to be at least $170 per ton, or $170 per ton. And but that's at the federal level. And so by 2030, Quebec would be paying an estimated $97 per ton by 2030. And so it's on pause right now. It's very terrifying. And they're going to justify, even if we, cancel the carbon tax, they're going to call it, they already renamed it, but it's going to be classified as the Green Fund. And that's going to be the Net Zero Agenda 2030. You'll be eating bugs. There will be no meat. There'll be no cars. It'll be like electrical cars and hybrids. And that was another thing too in the debates that was they didn't mention. They're talking about oil, and they're talking about vehicles that use oil and electrical vehicles, but they didn't even mention hybrid or the fact that in Quebec, where they're pushing, we're gonna, like, no vehicles, that run on oil by I think it was by 2030 or whatever it was as well. Absolutely ridiculous. But at this rate, I think it was 2.5 or 2.8% of people in Quebec have electric vehicles. Okay, and so not a lot, and I think it's like between 14 and 16% of people own hybrids, right? And like added in that as well, in that number as well. And so the electrical vehicles throughout Canada, and Quebec actually has the highest amount of electric vehicles, not including the hybrids. And so even within BC, and I think it's 14% or 14 to 16% for electrical and hybrid vehicles. And the hybrids, they were introduced in 2017, and there were so many strict measures to make sure that there was a certain quota that was pushed on the population, whether we wanted it or not. It seemed that every single friggin' vehicle that there was the option to buy. I'm exaggerating a little bit, but they were hybrid or electrical versions. And because people were saying that they were going to phase out the petroleum vehicles, and which is insane. And so we're in 2025 right now, and people are still using their oil vehicles. It's not changing really, nor should it. We are in colder climates, and in Canada, we are the second biggest country in the world, and we have longer distances to travel than most other countries. And electrical vehicles are not as reliable at all or efficient as oil-based vehicles, and there needs to be less trade barriers interprovincially and with the territories, and we need to exploit the resources that we have in an ethical, moral, scientific way. That obviously factors in cultural complications that might arise as well, and like maintain and strengthen our relationships with Indigenous communities across Canada, where we can mutually benefit from the tapping into our resources for more funding. I could go on a list too with like even like nuclear energy, promoting that more. It is a safer energy, and Canada is very large, and so if there's concerns, they need to be built well. We have classic examples of like what where people have learned from mistakes that have happened throughout the world with nuclear facilities. But we can learn from that, and again, we have plenty of places where they can be located where we can make it where it wouldn't be harmful or leak into the soil, the environment, using some kind of like cavity system made of stone, cement, blocks, etc. And then have it where it's close to a water system, obviously, and away from populations, right? By I think at least 30 friggin' miles. And again, there's tangents on that. I'll share one more article and then I'll bounce because I do have a lot of things to do today because I'm leaving over the weekend. It's going to be very busy and I'm not coming back till the beginning of, till the end of the month. So this just happened. Trump blocked Israeli proposed joint attack on Iran to pursue nuclear deal report. So, and by the way, this is from the Times of Israel. So I don't think you can call me biased. I'm literally reporting from people that are coming from Israel. But anyway, Jerusalem sought U.S. okay for a week of strikes on regime's nuclear facilities next month, but White House rifts spurred pivot to diplomacy shortly before Netanyahu's visit. So this was posted today, just an hour ago. U.S. President Donald Trump quashed Israeli proposals for a series of joint strikes next month on Iranian nuclear facilities, opting instead to try for a diplomatic solution to the problem of Tehran's nuclear program. The New York Times reported Wednesday. Okay, well, sometimes they report accurate stuff, but yeah, I have videos that I can share, but I won't. But you can refer to them. But where I say specifically that Netanyahu would talk about striking Iran's nuclear sites, and this would initiate or trigger a friggin' World War III event. And what happened, right? And so this is on the record, proposed a friggin' strategy to attack Iran nuclear sites. Unbelievable. This guy is a criminal. He's committed so many crimes against humanity, and also directly and indirectly funding Hamas. The terrorists from within. I will reiterate, Hamas. They were democratically elected in 2006. And there's been constant turmoil and conflict and occupation issues and stuff like that. And again, crimes against people on both sides, right? There are radicals within that organization. I have never disputed that. Committed awful acts against people from Israel. But it's also, this is very much not one-sided, right? And they're the impact of people from within Israel and who's supporting and enabling them against Palestinians, innocent civilians, it is deplorable. It's genocide. It is a literal genocide, and that is not getting reported. You've got the Hasbara, which is Israeli propaganda, and other organizations from Israel or that are pro-Israel, that are dehumanizing Palestinians in the reporting of casualties, including one of the Hamas leaders, his grandson dying at 4 years old by Israel strikes. And people glorifying that and celebrating that. I just don't understand. Oh my God. Had nothing to do with what's going on. This little child, this little 4-year-old boy, if it's true, it's tragic. And so this is the stuff that I'm talking about. We should not be supporting or enabling that, even if the ideologies and the religion from people within Palestine, by the way, there's Christians there as well. But if for the majority of the population, they don't align with Christian ideologies or values, we can still live amongst each other in a much more collaborative way. But anyway, I'm going to stop ranting. On that note, I will leave it at that, and I hope that everyone has a wonderful rest of your day.